For over 2,000 years, Albanian lands have been contested, passed through, and conquered by a succession of foreign powers and empires. Under Roman rule, native languages faded across the Mediterranean, yet Albanian is still spoken today. Then came the Slavic migrations. Across the Balkans, older pre-Slavic peoples were absorbed, their languages replaced, their identities dissolved into the new Slavic world. It should have happened to the Albanians too. Instead, sheltered in the highlands of what is now Albania and Kosovo, they endured. Against the odds, their language and their culture survived the centuries that erased so many others. And now, science backs the story. A 2026 peer-reviewed DNA study found that modern Albanians predominantly descend from the ancient Paleo-Balkan populations associated with the Illyrians. In this video, we explore 5 things to know about Albanian survival and continuity, and how a people, a language, and an identity outlasted empire after empire. Number 1. Albanians have lived in the Balkans for over 3,000 years. In 2026, the journal Nature Human Behavior published a landmark study, Ancient DNA Evidence for the History of the Albanians, by a team led by Leonidas Romanos Davranoglu of Oxford, with Alban Lauka, Aris Aristodemou, and colleagues. They analyzed more than 6,000 ancient genomes from across the Balkans, alongside newly sequenced DNA from present-day Albanians, spanning every major dialect group. The results were striking. Modern Albanians retain roughly 3/4 of their ancestry from the indigenous Bronze and Iron Age populations of the Western Balkans, and their paternal lineages in particular trace in an unbroken line back to the Bronze Age, to the peoples known to history as the Illyrians. One of the earliest written sources on those Illyrians comes from the Greek historian Thucydides. He records how, in the 5th century BCE, a power struggle at the coastal colony of Epidamnos, modern-day Durrës, drew in the Illyrian Taulanti, then Corfu, then Corinth, in a spiral that helped ignite the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. For centuries, critics doubted that today's Albanians were their descendants. They argued Albanians arrived only in the Middle Ages, migrating from somewhere to the northeast, pointing to a blackout in the record from roughly 200 to 1000 AD, when no written source names a people called Albanians. The new DNA evidence suggests a small Proto-Albanian population endured in the rugged, mountainous interior, the highlands spanning northern Albania and southwestern Kosovo. As Slavic settlers spread through the river valleys and fertile plains below, they passed by these highlands. Number 2. The Albanian language has survived empire and upheaval. Roman rule saw dozens of native languages fade across the ancient Mediterranean as conquered peoples adopted Latin and Roman law. In the Balkans, the tongues of the Thracians and Dacians left only fragments, and Illyrian vanished so completely under Latin administration that it survives today only in scattered traces, personal and place names, without a single surviving text. Today's genetic and linguistic evidence points to modern Albanian as the last living descendant of that ancient Balkan speech. Albanian is an independent branch of the Indo-European family, as distinct and ancient a lineage as Greek. Setting Greek aside, it is the only surviving language of the ancient Paleo-Balkan world, and it has no close relatives anywhere on Earth. The clues to its endurance are written on the land itself. While much of the Balkans took on Slavic place names from the 6th century onward, the Albanian highlands often held on to older Paleo-Balkan and Latin-era names, the fingerprints of a people who never left. What makes this survival remarkable is that for the vast majority of its history, Albanian was never written at all. The first recorded Albanian appears only in the 15th century. That means the language was carried across countless generations, through Rome, through Byzantium, through the Slavic migrations, by the spoken word alone. And when it finally was written, it was set down in many scripts: Latin, Greek, Arabic, even Cyrillic, each reflecting the empire or the faith that surrounded its speakers at the time. This refusal to surrender the mother tongue, even under the weight of more powerful imperial and sacred languages, became a defining Albanian trait. It gave stateless people an unshakable sense of being distinct, and by the 19th century, that language became the beating heart of the national awakening, a standardized alphabet, the first Albanian language schools, a flowering of local publishing, the pillars on which a modern Albanian identity was finally built. Number 3. Religious pragmatism. The faith of Albanians is Albanianism. Unlike Serbia or Greece, Albanians never built their national identity around a single state religion. Albanians are Muslim, Orthodox Christian, and Catholic all at once, a legacy of centuries spent on the fault line between the Western and Eastern Roman worlds, and later the Ottoman one. Under Ottoman rule, faith was not just belief, it was status. Your religion determined the taxes you paid, the privileges you held, and the autonomy you were granted. Orthodox Christians kept a recognized legal standing and self-governance under the ecumenical patriarchate in Istanbul. Muslims gained the right to own land, careers in the army and imperial administration, and exemption from the heavy poll tax levied on non-Muslims. And Albanian Muslims rose strikingly high. Dozens became grand viziers, the empire's chief ministers, so often that Albanian became almost a byword for the Ottoman soldier-statesman. The most consequential of them all was Muhammad Ali Pasha. Born to an Albanian family in Kavala, he seized control of Egypt as Ottoman viceroy, transformed it into a near-independent power, and founded a dynasty that ruled Egypt and Sudan until the fall of King Farouk in 1952. Yet for all these divisions, one idea came to bind Albanians together. In 1878, the poet Pashko Vasa wrote a single line that would become the foundation of modern Albanian identity. The faith of the Albanians is Albanianism. It was a call for tolerance and unity, a pragmatic embrace of pluralism that stood in sharp contrast to the mono-religious nationalisms rising elsewhere in the Balkans. Nationalists and communists alike would seize on that phrase to forge a modern nation from Catholic, Orthodox, and Muslim alike. That secular spirit was later pushed to a brutal extreme when Enver Hoxha's Stalinist dictatorship banned religion outright in 1967 and declared Albania the world's first atheist state, leaving the country to this day among the most secular in Europe. And so today, Albanians will readily count believers of 3 faiths within a single family. Personal faith is one thing, organized religion and state power quite another. In Albania, the nation comes first. Number 4. Albanian cultural survival, built on adaptation. Time and again, Albanians faced powers that should have erased them. Instead of resisting to the death, they survived by adapting, bending to each new empire, absorbing what they had to, and enduring. And they could do this because of geography. When the lowlands were conquered and resettled, Albanian culture and custom lived on in the northern mountains, a highland refuge that no empire, Roman, Byzantine, Slavic, or Ottoman, ever fully controlled. The Illyrians were conquered by Rome, yet during the chaos of the 3rd century, it was tough soldiers from the Illyrian provinces who rose on merit to become emperors and pulled the empire back from collapse. When imperial control over the Balkans collapsed and Slavic peoples settled the lowlands, Albanians didn't disappear. They took in Slavic loanwords where the two peoples lived closest, in the plains and valleys, while in the isolated highlands their speech stayed older and purer. They adapted again and again. Albanians fought alongside the Byzantines against Norman invaders. Albanian nobles took Byzantine titles to secure local power. Coastal towns aligned with Venice for trade and protection. Even Skanderbeg, the great symbol of Albanian resistance, tells this story. For all his brilliance as a commander, his 25-year revolt was backed and funded by Venice and Naples. Most lowland Albanians never joined it, and he fought rival Albanian lords who had sided with the Sultan. Even the resistance was pragmatic. This strategic flexibility, the willingness to shift loyalties and adapt to every external pressure, is precisely what let Albanians endure. Number 5. Albanian Highland Codes, Honor and Hospitality as Law. The remote northern mountains, extending into what is now Kosovo and North Macedonia, were never brought fully under any empire's control. The terrain was too harsh, the tax revenues too thin, the people too difficult to govern. So here, Albanians ruled themselves, not by the law of any state, but by the kanun, a body of customary law carried by memory for centuries and finally written down only in the 20th century. The kanun governed everything: land, marriage, boundaries, the family, the clan, holding communities together where no government reached. At its heart lay two sacred obligations. The first was besa, the pledged word. To give your besa was to stake your honor and your life on keeping it. A promise sworn under besa was unbreakable. The second was mikpritya, hospitality. Under the kanun, the guest was sacred. The home belonged to God and to the guest, and a host was bound to protect a visitor, even a stranger, even an enemy under truce, at the cost of his own life. This was no abstract ideal. It is the code that, in the Second World War, moved Albanian families to hide Jews fleeing the Holocaust. That same oath sheltered British officers who parachuted into the mountains and were hiding from Germans. Under besa, the hunted stranger became a sacred guest. Here was order without a state, a world where the sworn word, the sacred guest, and the sheer weight of honor did the work that governments do elsewhere. Finally, number 6. Albanian identity survives without a unifying state. Only a third of all Albanians live inside Albania itself. Kosovo, overwhelmingly Albanian, is effectively a second Albanian nation. Large Albanian communities also live in North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Greece. In southern Italy, the Arboresh, who fled the Ottoman conquest, have kept their language and traditions alive for over 500 years. And the roots run deeper still. From the late 13th and 14th centuries, Albanians settled across southern Greece, in Attica, Boeotia, and the Peloponnese. Their descendants, the Arvanites, would go on to give the Greek War of Independence some of its greatest heroes. Yet on the other side of that same war stood Muslim Albanians in Ottoman service, including the Egyptian army led by the Albanian Muhammad Ali. Albanians, it turned out, could be found on both sides of history's turning points. When Albania finally won its independence in 1912, the borders drawn around it left more than half of all Albanians outside the new state. The nation and the state have never truly mapped onto each other. And that, more than anything, is the defining fact of the modern Albanian condition.